The year is 1770. It is a warm Virginia morning, and on the Duke of Gloucester Street, the most powerful mile of road in the entire British colonial world, a young man named Thomas Jefferson is walking to class. He is 27 years old, sharp-jawed, already restless, already reading everything he can find. He passes the Raleigh Tavern on his left, hears the clinking of pewter mugs through the open door, catches the smell of tobacco smoke and roasting meat drifting from the kitchen behind it, and keeps walking. He doesn't know yet that within 6 years he will write words in that same town that will bring an empire to its knees. Nobody in Williamsburg knows, not yet. This is the city the history books dress in wigs and candlelight and call charming. It was charming. Breathtakingly so. It was also sitting on a powder keg with the fuse already burning. This is Colonial Williamsburg, 1770, the most sophisticated British city in America, the crucible in which the American Revolution was quietly, then loudly being forged. And this is the full story, the elegance and the anger, the candlelit ballrooms and the locked slave quarters just behind them. Walk with us. To understand what Williamsburg was in 1770, you have to understand what it was designed to be. In 1699, when the old State House at Jamestown burned down for the second time, and colonial legislators finally gave up on that swampy, snake-infested riverbank for good, Governor Francis Nicholson was handed a rare opportunity, a blank slate, 5 miles inland, on a ridge of higher ground between the York and James rivers. He didn't just build a capital, he designed one, grid streets, designated public greens, lot sizes regulated by law. It was one of the first genuinely planned cities in American history, conceived from the beginning as a stage for British authority. The Duke of Gloucester Street was its spine, 99 feet wide, a full mile long, running perfectly straight from the red brick facade of the College of William and Mary on the west end to the Capitol building on the east. Almost no other city in colonial America could claim a public thoroughfare that grand. It was built to impress, and it did. Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he visited in 1934, called it the most historic avenue in America. He was not wrong. At the Capitol's eastern anchor sat the hub of Virginia's government, the House of Burgesses, the oldest elected legislative assembly in the New World, where men like George Washington, Patrick Henry, and Peyton Randolph had been gathering for decades to debate, argue, and increasingly to resist. At the western end, the College of William and Mary, the second oldest institution of higher education in the colonies, after Harvard, sent its students in their dark coats along the same brick sidewalks where tradesmen and market vendors and soldiers and tavern keepers all moved together in the particular layered chaos of a colonial capital. Standing back to admire the street in 1770, you would see something that genuinely looked like a prosperous English market town, white clapboard buildings with green shutters, formal gardens behind iron gates, church spires rising above the tree canopy. You would hear the rhythmic ring of the blacksmith's hammer on iron, the creak and rumble of horse-drawn carriages on the sandy road, the shouts of vendors at the market square. The smell would reach you before almost anything else: wood smoke, horse dung, salt pork, and the sweet green scent of Virginia's warm, humid air in early autumn. On public times, the weeks when the legislature was in session and the courts were open, the population of this normally quiet town of roughly 2,000 residents would swell to 5,000 as planters rode in from the countryside, lawyers arrived from the outlying counties, and merchants from across the Atlantic docked their ships at the nearby wharves and made their way up the road to sell their goods. The social engine of all of it was the Raleigh Tavern. Established around 1717, by 1770 it had become the most consequential public room in Virginia, and arguably in all of the 13 colonies. Its Apollo room, just inside the front door, was part ballroom, part dining hall, part unofficial parliament. During session weeks, planters in silk waistcoats and powdered wigs played cards there by firelight while arguing about import duties. Members of the House of Burgesses adjourned from the Capitol and continued their debates across plates of roast chicken and bowls of syllabub. George Washington was a regular. Jefferson dined there so often its keeper knew his preferences. The tavern's sign above the door bore a lead bust of Sir Walter Raleigh, the man who had first dreamed of English settlement in Virginia 2 centuries earlier, and beneath it, in Latin, the motto Hilaritas sapientiae et bonae vitae proles. Joy is the offspring of wisdom and good living. The irony of those words would deepen considerably over the next 5 years. Half a mile north of the Raleigh, at the top of a long formal garden and behind a set of ornate iron gates, rose the governor's palace. Completed in 1722, it was everything a symbol of British imperial power was supposed to be. Georgian architecture at its most self-assured, the brickwork warm and honey-coloured in the afternoon light, flanks of formal topiary lining the approach, a cupola catching the sun at the building's crown. Inside, 60 rooms, walls hung with crossed flintlock muskets arranged in decorative patterns, hundreds of them, a deliberate display of armed authority, and a succession of lavish reception halls where royal governors hosted balls celebrating the king's birthday, complete with hired musicians, fireworks in the garden, and tables piled with food from kitchens running all night. What made the palace run? What kept the fires burning, the tables set, the carriages polished, the floors waxed, the gardens trimmed, the coal carried, the laundry done, was the labor of up to 30 enslaved people and servants working in the outbuildings clustered behind the main house. Stables, a carriage house, a scullery, a laundry, a kitchen entirely separate from the main building. A whole economy of invisible labor sustaining the visible face of power. We know some of their names. We know frustratingly little else. And that is the detail the painted portraits and the architectural drawings never show you, the other half of the city. In 1770, as many as half of Williamsburg's population was enslaved. Nearly 1,000 human beings in a city of roughly 2,000, living in conditions that ranged from grim to unimaginable, doing the work that kept the entire elegant apparatus functioning. Behind the Raleigh Tavern, when Anthony Hay owned it in 1770, an estate inventory listed 20 enslaved people by their first names: Lucy, Caesar, Rachel, Jimmy, Sarah, Will, and others. When Hay died that same year, 19 of them were sold before the tavern door to new enslavers. Only one was kept. These were not footnotes to the story. They were the story, running parallel and unseen beneath the candlelit surface of colonial prestige. And beneath all of it, the political temperature was rising. 5 years before our walk down Duke of Gloucester Street in 1765, a 29-year-old freshman burgess named Patrick Henry had stood in the Capitol building and delivered a broadside against the British Stamp Act so incendiary that conservative colleagues cried "treason" from the floor. The galleries went silent. Then the crowd roared. The Stamp Act was eventually repealed, But the principle it had exposed, that Parliament was taxing colonists without giving them representation, did not go away. It gathered. By 1769, the House of Burgesses had passed resolutions condemning British taxation so directly that Governor Bottetour had dissolved the entire assembly. The former Burgesses walked 200 yards down the street, reconvened in the Apollo room of the Raleigh Tavern, and voted to boycott British goods. They were not yet calling for independence, but they were drawing lines. In the autumn of 1770, as Jefferson walked to his classes and Washington rode into town to attend sessions, and young men in the taverns argued about liberty while enslaved people served them their food and cleared their plates, Williamsburg wore the composed face of a city at the height of its influence. It had its own newspaper, 2 competing Virginia gazettes, printing political arguments and public notices, and sometimes advertisements for the capture of people who had escaped from bondage. It had George Wythe's law school, turning out the legal minds that would draft the constitutions of the coming republic. It would get its public hospital in 1773, the first institution in North America built exclusively for the care of the mentally ill. The city was, by every external measure, flourishing. What was growing underneath that flourish? In the Apollo room, in the Capitol hallways, in the classified discussions at the George Wythe House where Jefferson had studied law, in the enslaved congregation gathering secretly in the woods at the edge of town that would become Williamsburg's First Baptist Church, was something that would detonate the entire British Atlantic world. 4 years after our walk, in May 1774, the governor would dissolve the House of Burgesses again. The Burgesses would march to the Raleigh Tavern again, and this time they would call for a Continental Congress. 2 years after that, Virginia would declare itself for independence. And from the same Capitol building where Patrick Henry had once terrified the room, a new flag would fly from the cupola. Not the Union Jack. Something else entirely. The Duke of Gloucester Street is still there. The buildings are still standing. 89 original 18th century structures, preserved or restored on their original foundations. If you walk it today, the scale of what was being risked in those years becomes physical, becomes real. A mile of brick sidewalk. 1,000 arguments. The whole American idea assembling itself in tavern rooms and courthouse corridors and whispered conversations in kitchen gardens, out of the sight of governors and kings. If this walk through 1770 Williamsburg left you wanting more, if you felt the heat of that summer, heard the arguments spilling out of the Apollo room, saw the contradictions written into the brickwork of that extraordinary city, then you are exactly why History Recreated exists. Subscribe, leave a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest, and let us know which corner of American history you want us to step into next. The city is waiting. The year is always 1770, and the revolution, as always, is just beginning.